There we go. Okay, so thank you again for joining. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Harriet Winfield, and I am the president this year for the CIPFA Student Network. And I'm also currently a CIPFA student, and I will also be sitting the case study and SPF in December. So I'm very much in the same boat as you, and I know exactly how you feel. So for this session, the aim of it is to really help increase your confidence for how to prepare for the exam, but also to give you some tips on how you might approach the exam on the actual day. So I'm hoping that for those of us who are sitting the exam in December, this will help you to sit the mock, which we're sitting in next week, because we've got a little bit of time to digest it, put the tips into practice, and then we'll be able to apply them to the mock when we sit it in preparation for the exam that we have in December. So during this session, we'll be hearing from two students who have recently passed the exam, the case study exam. This is Jack and Lynn, so we'll be hearing from those later. And then we'll move on to a myth busting session, and then we'll have a Q&A. So I'll talk about those in a little bit. So before we get properly started, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about the CSN. So the CSN is run by students for students. And as I said, I am the current president of the CSN. And I've also got a committee below me who are all students as well. So we're all working to put things like this on for you and to make the lives of students a little bit better. So we're currently fully established in our committee. We don't have any positions open, but we'd still encourage you to attend any meetings if you are interested. They run on the second Wednesday of every month, and our next meeting is on the 8th of November. And if you're interested in joining that, then you can click on that email that link at the bottom, csn@cipfa.org, and we can get the invite over to you. And also at the bottom, I put the link to the WhatsApp group for the December sitting. So if you're sitting the exam in December, I'd really encourage you to join that. We'll hear from Jack and Lynn later about how important it is for collaboration. And this is really how you can get connected with other students. That link, I will circulate the slides after this so that you can click on that link, because I appreciate you won't be able to do it now, but I would encourage you to join when that comes around. Okay, so just to get us started, I hope that you've all used Menti before, but if not, it's just a way that we can interact with you. So if you type in that link there, it's menti.com into your Google search bar, and then the code that you need is 1256413. So that should load you up onto a page, and I'm going to switch screens now. And the first question that we'd like to know is how you're feeling about the case study exam. So I'll just give you all a little bit of time to get set up with that. And if you have any problems, if you could just raise your hand. And Jack and Lynn, if you could keep an eye on the hands, because I just can't see the hands when I'm in this mode. Thank you. Yes, this is what I thought might be coming through. So a lot of nervous coming through, anxious, unprepared. So hopefully this session will make you feel a bit more prepared. And obviously when the advanced material comes out, that will be helpful as well. Overwhelmed. Okay. I'm glad to see some fines and okays in there. That's good to see. Pessimistic. Okay. Well, hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be feeling slightly more positive and in slightly better position, perhaps slightly less unprepared, a bit more of an action plan as to how you're going to tackle it. But as I said, I'm glad that it's not entirely negative. We've got some okays and some fines, but as I said, by the end of this session, we'll be feeling in a better position, I'm certain. So I'm going to stop that one, and I'm going to move you on to another question. So this is just for our speakers, just to get a sense of who's attended the webinar today. So we're curious to know, is this your first time sitting the case study exam? So are you sitting it in December? Are you sitting it maybe in the future? Or maybe you're resitting it? Just let us know. And if anyone's not be able to find the code, it is still at the top if you want to join. Okay, so it looks like the majority of people who are here are sitting it in December. We've got a couple of people who are resitting, 3 at the moment, and then a few people who are getting ahead of for when they sit the exam. It's good to see. Okay. Just leave it a little bit longer. Okay, looks like it stopped coming through now. So I think, yeah, we've got 25 people who are sitting in December, 15 people who are a little bit ahead, and 3 who are resitting. Okay. And next question is, how many mocks have you sat? So for those 15 or so of you that haven't sat or aren't sitting the exam yet, you won't have sat any, so feel free to put 0 or just miss this one out. But for us, I think, who are sitting the exam in December, you probably had the opportunity to sit 3 mocks. And then if you're resitting it, you may have sat more, so feel free to just tick that more box. But I'm very glad to see that most people have done 3. Personally, I've done 2. But next week it'll be 3. Excellent. Okay. Okay, so we've got a few people who have done 0. It's hard to know whether those are the people who haven't sat it yet or haven't sat any of the mocks, but I think you'll hear from Jacqueline later how important the mocks are. So this is just to get a bit of a heads up as to what position we're in. Okay, alrighty. Okay, thank you for doing that. Let's get started. So I think I'm going to hand over to Jack now. So I'll stop sharing my screen, Jack, so you can share your slides. All right.
Thanks, Harriet. Just to introduce myself, first of all. So I'm Jack O'Shea, and I currently work in Glasgow. I sat my exam in December 2022. Fortunately, I passed, and I was actually able to secure a very high score in that exam as well. So I'm hoping I can impart some knowledge and advice to you. I do have a presentation to share here, so I'll just go ahead and share that. Okay, can you see that all right? There we go.
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay, all right. So first of all, I do have quite a strong Glaswegian accent, so apologies to any international students if you struggle to understand me. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, and we'll be distributing these slides after the fact as well, so hopefully you'll get everything that you need. So I've structured this presentation into 2 sections. The first is around planning and preparation, so everything you can do up until the exam day. And then the second section will cover what you can do on the exam day to make sure you're prepared and you're effective during your examination. So we see the sections that we're going to move through there, but I'll cover each in detail as we progress. Okay, so first of all, mock exams, I probably don't need to reiterate how important they are. I think our colleagues at the ICAEW published a nice post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago about how much the students that sit their mock exams succeed compared to students who don't sit any mocks. And it's not always about passing or failing at this stage. It's really just about building your technique, gaining confidence, and getting positive feedback about how you can improve. So I would really recommend trying to sit at least one, if possible, all 4. I know I sat all 4. And what you really want to see during those mocks is a kind of incremental improvement in your performance. So if you don't pass the first time, don't be disheartened. Try to get 2 or 3 more points in the next mock and just build your way up. The skills that you learn during your exam or during the mock exams are transferable to on the day. So if you set a clock and you're working under exam pressure, you'll build those skills to be able to respond under pressure when you see questions that you thought might not come up, something a bit out of the ordinary. And it'll give you the confidence that you need to succeed on the day. One important thing about the mock exams is obviously learning from your mistakes. So the feedback that the markers give is incredibly useful, mostly positive as well. They kind of give you avenues to improve your performance over time. So try and take that on board and learn from what you did wrong, if you did do anything wrong. And if you do secure a good score in your first mock, just think about improving that. every improvement you make will improve your chances on the day of getting the score that you're looking for, whether that be a pass or a high performance score. So the next section is just about study leave and study planning. So if possible, I would recommend taking at least 5 days of annual leave from your work. Your employer might give you a study quota that you can utilise. If not, then just try to get a few days off before. At least 5 days is preferable. Try and get your work out your mind and just focus all your attention on the case. If you can't get any time off, it's obviously going to be more difficult for you, but try to set some time aside at night after your work to focus on the case. On top of that, during your study period, try and switch off at night. When you stop studying, don't study 12 hours a day, because after a certain point it's almost completely useless. So if you can get to the gym, get out a walk, see your friends and family, please do. Don't stress too much. It's just an exam at the end of the day, and you can always reset, but try and be positive throughout this, and you're going to pass first time. So the way I did it to plan for my study was created a kind of project plan. It wasn't very detailed. It was just I'd identified areas that I needed to revise. I put it in a plan, specific dates leading up to the exam, just so that during my study sessions they were focused and targeted on what I needed to learn. I think it's very easy for your mind to wander during studying the case. There's a lot of information there. If you can try and target as much as you can, it can keep your mind focused. And then when it does eventually come to the exam, you'll be able to retain and regurgitate a lot of that you've revised. My next piece of advice would be to explore different methods of studying. So whether that be studying with different people in your work, studying with people in your web classes, or even, I know I did this, there's text-to-voice technologies that you can use. You can transfer your notes into a format that you can listen to, whether you're driving, you're traveling to work, you're at the gym, just doing anything at night. I think that it kind of reinforces what you've learned and can be a good way to learn new information as well, because I know that staring at a screen or your paperwork all day is quite tedious and can quite disheartening at times. Finally, I would suggest that you try to get all your analysis, your detailed analysis out of the way within the first 3 weeks after the advanced material is released. That will give you plenty of time to go over it, try and reinforce what you've learned, and then pick up on any points that you're maybe not sure about. But I would try and avoid doing any detailed analysis in the 2 or 3 days leading up to the exam, because at that point you really want to focus in on learning, preparing and practicing for the questions that may come up. Okay, so in the next section, I'm going into a bit of detail here. It might be a bit difficult to read on the screen, but I know we had a few questions coming in from the surveys that were issued about just how to analyse the case and how to prepare for the questions that may come up. So the way I did it, and I know a lot of other students do this as well, is I first of all prepared an overarching review document. So you're really just trying to summarise the case in a bit of detail, not too much detail. You're trying to pick out the main themes, where the question areas you think might come up. Look at the organisation's strategy, look at the challenges and risks as it's facing, and then creating links to models and concepts that you may think come up in the exam, so that you can then go on to prepare more detailed analysis. In your analysis document, so for my exam, I thought there may have been 3 different questions that come up. There was one on strategic analysis, there was one on performance, there was options appraisal, etc. in there. So for each area, I created a different document, and I just went through it kind of meticulously. I looked over the previous modules that we'd learned. So the most relevant ones are, financial management, your strategy module, your business change module, and strategic public finance. And then just try and apply those concepts and models. I would recommend that you don't try and create your own questions for it. You run the risk of trying to learn your answers by rote, and when you go into the exam, you end up just regurgitating what you've learned rather than what they're asking you. So try and think of the big picture there. Think about it in areas rather than specific questions if possible. And your analysis should be very detailed. You should really try to fully evaluate everything that's going on. come up with the benefits and risks of potential options, analyse the challenges that are being faced, and try to prepare an answer as you would an exam, trying to with a introduction, conclusion, bullet points to reinforce what you're saying, etc. And then finally, try to identify what you don't have. So what you don't have, for example, if you have financial statements for last financial year and you've got a target set to achieve specific financial targets in the current financial year, that may indicate that you'll be given a new set of financial statements and try to analyse and ask to analyse the performance between the 2 years. Again, there might be they might throw a couple of spanners in the works with the exam day material, but if you think about what you don't have, you will likely find that you are given that during the exam. So how you format your analysis. So the strategic case study workbook goes into a bit of detail about how they would like you to answer questions to score high marks and perform well. To be honest, I kind of struggled to understand the way it was written in the workbook, so I came up with some kind of paraphrases for myself. So what they say in the workbook is you need to describe what's happening, analyse it, and then evaluate it to create a kind of well-reasoned conclusion and a point in the exam. So I would refer to description as what is happening. So you can refer to the facts. You can lift that straight from the case and the exam day materials. Your analysis should be focused on why is it important in the context of the case itself. So you'll be referring to the organisation there. And finally, your evaluations are what are the implications? So if they do take a course of action or they don't take a course of action, what is the impact and what are your recommendations about how it should be improved or built upon? So I've created a very rudimentary example here. Not a lot of detail in it. I won't go through this word for word, but as you can see there in the description, you're really just lifting information from the case. So you're saying that people are preferring to book sessions online rather than by phone or by email. You're analysing it, so you're applying your knowledge of the organisation based on the information in the case. So in this case, the organisation doesn't have the online infrastructure to facilitate online bookings. Bookings are currently being made by telephone, and that's placed a strain on staffing and resources. So in your evaluation, this is where you want to kind of summarise what the risks and the benefits are of potential courses of action. So we're saying here that there's a risk that service users may look elsewhere, and that could give advantages to other organisations in the sector or market. And then we're recommending that the organisation should look to utilise its resources, and then you can to fund that investment. And you can also look at the benefits and risks and issues associated with that. So I'm happy to provide more detail with that offline if anybody's looking for assistance with it. So feel free to give me an email. I'll share my email after the session. Okay, so I think this is the final point in the initial part of this presentation. It's just looking at the models that might be relevant, and you're not going to get a question in all of these, but it really helps you if you apply these, particularly the strategic analysis models like SWOT, PESTEL, 5 forces, etc. It not only gives you a platform to build upon your exam answers, but it increases your understanding of the case tenfold. You can think of it from different perspectives. So if they do ask you a question that you weren't fully prepared for, you have that kind of background knowledge to apply it in the exam and come up with a great answer. So again, I won't go through all those in detail, but you can see there most of the models are actually pretty straightforward. So you're looking at kind of governance structures, the organisation structure itself, change management. You probably will be dealing with change management in most cases. There will be a change of some sort happening. There'll be stakeholders involved, and they will have different perspectives and points of view and potentially impacts on what your proposed strategies will be. And then investment appraisals, that's another big area. So there will normally be an option that they're proposing to move forward to either improve performance or address a particular issue. You might need to apply net present value or payback period models, etc., to assess whether the economic benefits of that are feasible and achievable. So you don't need to apply all of them, but just try and think of applying some of these during your initial analysis. And then that'll improve your understanding of the case to an extent when you go into a detailed analysis that you'll really have that background understanding. Okay, so Harriet referred to collaboration in her initial statements. So it's incredibly important for the case study, much more so than any of the other modules you'll have studied thus far. You'll have a lot of different opportunities for collaboration. First and foremost, there'll be a WhatsApp group created where most of the students will be involved with that. You can share ideas, receive feedback, etc. But you can also look at other ways to collaborate. So I know that I spoke to my workplace mentor who sat at the exam a few years ago, and he gave me some ideas that I could build upon. Your manager might be able to help you. They've got different experiences and knowledge, and they can think of things from a different perspective than you at this stage in your career. And then also any other former students in your work, they'll be happy to help you because they know how hard this is. So try and utilise as much of that as possible. The second point I'd like to make is actually sharing your work is more important than receiving work shared by others, in my opinion. Getting that peer feedback and learning from that is incredibly important. So try not to be one of the students that is silent in the group chat, doesn't share anything, picks up everybody else's work and doesn't contribute. And if you do receive work from other students, it can be very valuable at times, but what you want to do is you don't want to simply accept what they've said. You want to try and evaluate that, build in what their statements are into your own work, and that will hopefully improve your understanding of the case and give you more perspectives to your answers. Okay, so that brings us on to the next section, which is about your actual exam day. And I'll cover areas such as just general preparation, how you should use the two types of material, the advanced material and the exam material, how to structure your answer and how to address the order of your questions, as well as how to manage your time, which I know is a big concern for a lot of people sitting this exam. Okay, so I mean, you'll know all these already, they're pretty obvious, but try and relax as much as possible. Try and make sure you get enough food and water in you before the exam to fuel your brain, make sure you're fully prepared, and try and get a good night's sleep before it, which I know is much easier said than done, but if you're not tired, you're not feeling fatigued on the day of your exam, you probably will perform much better. Picking a suitable time is a good point as well. So if you get the option of choosing a different exam slot time for your invigilation, I think it's normally in the morning, the case study. So you could either do it at 9 o'clock, which is the first session, but that may not be feasible for people who, for example, are sending their kids to school, or if you're like me, you're not a morning person, struggle to wake up a wee bit. And finally, I would say on the day of your exam, don't study anything, try not to revise anything, just try and focus on the exam. You don't want to burn out before you actually see the first question. You're going to have a lot to do in the exam. It's a long exam and it's very taxing both mentally and physically on you. So try and relax, try and get a coffee, some water in you, and then fully focus on how you're going to address the exam when it starts. Okay, so this is another area where a lot of people had some concerns, particularly around the use of the advanced material and the exam day material. So by the time you get to your exam, you should have a detailed understanding of the advanced material. You should hopefully be able to remember, you won't remember it word for word, but you should hopefully be able to remember specific sections of it, where information is included in the case, so that if you do need to refer back to it, for example, if you need figures from the case, which you're unlikely to remember, you need specific names of stakeholders, etc. You know where to look. You're not flicking through 15 sheets of paper trying to find it. That's just a waste of time and energy. So your focus when you start the exam should be on the exam day materials and the questions. The information in the exam day materials is significant. It can often either confirm your assumptions that you made during your analysis, or it can conflict with it. So it's really important that you read through that and identify if there are areas of conflict so that you can rethink your proposals and your answers. What I would recommend doing is, first of all, reading through the questions so you have an idea of what to expect. You can then move on to reading the exam day materials. Because you've already read the questions, you'll know which areas of the exam day material are relevant to which areas of the paper. You can write it down in your blank paper, a summary of what the exam day material means, what questions it could be relevant to, and then when you start to answer them, it should be easy enough. You don't need to kind of dig through them, reread them 100,000 times to fully understand them. Okay, so this is kind of just summarising what I've said there. A few other key points is there may be some questions that you find more easy than others. So, for example, in the exam that I sat, literally the first question was asking for key performance indicators. So I had prepared for that and I knew that I had an answer for that. So I could just dig right in the first question and work my way through in a sequential order. But there might be, for example, a SWOT or a PESTO that you're prepared for, you're really confident with, might be 3-4 questions in. If you want to start with that question, then please do. Get some points on the board and build your confidence for the more complex and challenging questions. The calculations in exam are important. Often they're probably more simple than what you've experienced in the technical papers, but there's a lot of information in them, so it's very unlikely to get them 100% right. I know that as accountants, we want to get the numbers right first and foremost, but it's really about how you use the numbers to inform your narrative answers that's most important. And finally, it's pretty unlikely that you will have the time, but if you do have some time at the end of the exam, make sure you go back through and read your answers again. If you've said something earlier in the paper that conflicts with something that you've said later in the paper, you might need to rethink that and just make sure that they're consistent across all your answers. Okay, so this is kind of my advice on the structure of your answers during the exam. So again, we're covering that description, analysis, evaluation. So you're thinking what's happening, why is it important, and what are the implications? For each question, for each point that you're making, you really need to try and frame it in that context. Your presentation I believe, is also key. You don't get any points for structuring your answers and, for example, the reporting style that they're looking for, but it really helps you to write clearly, concisely, and in a business sense rather than just waffling on about a lot of nonsense, which can happen quite easily in this exam. So as much as possible, use headings, introductions, conclusions. You can use bullet points, and I know I used bullet points quite a lot in my exam, but you really need to make sure they're fully explained and explored using the DAE structure. And then you should always have a conclusion, and that's where you can factor in your recommendations. Your recommendations, they don't need to be long. If they're kind of cogent and they make sense and they're applicable, you're likely to pick up a mark for it. So try and get as many kind of relevant and structure relevant recommendations in there as possible. And finally, if you know that there is information that you don't have that you need to inform your decision making. So for example, if you only have part of the information on costings, you might need more. Just be clear on that. Say that you need more information in order to reach a well-reasoned and informed conclusion. And you are likely to pick up marks for that as well if you recognise gaps in your knowledge and understanding. Okay, so that is the end of it. Hopefully didn't go on for too long there, Harriet, but thanks.
That was really helpful. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, really, really useful. I've made some notes for myself as well. And there is a question for you in the chat. You should be able to type an answer if you want to take a look at it. It's from Kim about how you did your project plan and that sort of thing. Feel free to answer it while going on to the next part. So let me just reshare my screen. But I noticed, Tassia, you have your hand up, sorry. So I'm just going to give you permission to speak if you... Oh, you've taken it down. A legacy hand. Okay, perfect. Right. Okay, Lynn, I would like to hand over to you whenever you are ready.
Yeah, thank you, Harriet. Hi, everyone. I'm Lynn Liu, the past president of CSN. I qualified the CIPFA in 2022 and passed the final case study exam in 2021's December. But it took me a few times to pass the final tough exam though. Jack already gave us a very comprehensive tips I literally used every single tip on his list to prepare my case study exam. My session is about to highlight what Jack mentioned today. And also, I would like to share with you the lessons I've learned from my many times receipts, tell you what went wrong when I prepared and took my exams, and how I changed that. Hopefully, my sharing can help you to identify your current difficulties and enable you to pass the December's exam. So the first thing I want to emphasize is the reason I failed the case study in the first attempt was not due to a lack of preparation for the case study itself. I think this probably applies to everyone. I bet you would take the advantage of advanced material releasing 4 weeks before the exam day, read through the advanced materials, analyze the case, predict the questions, and generate your own answers to each potential questions, right? You prepared so hard, spent so much time on it. Then, why did you still fail the exam? I asked myself a lot of times. And then my answer is I over-prepared to the point I overwhelmed myself because I focused too much on small details elements, but I ignored the big pictures. The consequences of this preparation style is I restricted my flexibility to respond to actual exam questions as they were represented on the exam day. I trapped myself into preconceived model answers rather than addressing the questions directly. I think students who are taking the sessions today, if you take the case studies, on the past, you would know the questions from the case study aims to examine your strategic thinking, critical thinking, rather than test your detailed knowledge on how to do the work itself. So for example, when you read the case is about an organization is going to issue a bond to attract investment, the question in the exam day definitely won't ask you to give the examiner instructions of how to issue the bond. The question would around evaluate the advantage and disadvantage of issue bond to achieve the investment rather than use different ways to achieve the investment. It is less likely the examiner would ask you to calculate the NPV and IRR for all the investment options. It is more likely the examiner would give you the figures and ask you which option you would recommend based on the financial and non-financial elements. So what I'm saying here is when you prepare, read the advanced materials, spend your time and efforts on the key things the examiners care about. Don't let small details technique syllabus drag your attention away and drive you to a crazy. So how do you do that? My experience is 3 general steps. Step 1, when you have the advanced material, read the entire advanced materials in one go without interruption. Then quickly write down the key things you identified from your first reading. Normally, this would enable you to identify at least 3 key things. Step 2, according to the key things you identified through your first reading, to establish the case analysis models. For example, use PESTLE to identify the macro environment this organization is facing, whether they have a sound external environment to support their strategic development. Establish the SWOT to identify the investment internal, strengths and weaknesses, and external opportunities and threats. Use Porter's 5 forces to understand the levels of competition within the industry. While you establish these analysis models, you would read the case over and over again. So from there, you can start to break down the whole case into further pieces, and then start to establish the relevant potential questions. For example, you could start to establish the questions like, for example, identify the key stakeholders and discuss the key stakeholders' reaction to the options. Evaluate all the options in the context of the organization's own strategy, risk appetite, and external environment fit. Using the financial statements over past few years to evaluate organizations' financial performance trend and highlight any significant changes like that. So this method gives me a very constructive, top-down logical way to analysis, break down the whole case. So I know my preparation is in the right direction. I understand the main things which run through the whole case, rather than drowned myself by the small things scattered in a 15 pages case study. So in a real exam, I'm able to adapt my preparation to answer the actual questions on the exam day. This leads to my second exam tip, which is read the exam questions very, very carefully. Answer the questions which the examiners ask you to answer, rather than provide the answers you preconceived and you prepared. I can guarantee you, you won't get any marks, even though you write down 1,000 words beautifully in a question paper, if none of these are relevant to what the examiner is asking you for. So, how to make sure you answered what the questions ask for? So my experience is, when you open the exam day's material, the first thing you need to do is read the questions first. Highlight the keywords in the questions. Sometimes the questions can be answered without even reading the exam day material. And if the question cannot be answered straight away, then take your question to read the exam day materials again. So in my second tips, highlighting the keywords is the key. Sometimes misunderstand the questions would cause your answers wrong and lose the entire marks. I've summarized some common keywords which would often appear in the questions and how I would answer those questions. I mean, my sharing here won't be 100% accurate. You can take as a reference and apply to the real questions. So, for example, when the question is asking you about critically assess the content of a proposal, then you could start to talk about the proposal's calculation, whether the calculation is correct. Think about the proposal itself, whether this proposal is relevant and valid to the organization's strategy, whether the proposal is supported by the key stakeholders. When the question is asking you about evaluate something, then you need to evaluate the both sides, the good part and the bad part. And when the question is asking you about evaluate the suitability, acceptability, and the feasibility about something, about some strategy or some investments they are going to do, then you need to focus on what is the suitability, what is the acceptability and the feasibility. So to answer these questions, when you see these keywords, immediately in your head, you need to reflect, okay, suitability, whether this option is fit to the organization's objective, whether it's a fit for the short term or long term, whether it's feasible for the environment, social responsibility, and whether we doing this would avoid our weakness. For the acceptability, you need to think about it, whether this accepted by the key stakeholders, accepted by the financial return, accepted by your organization's risk appetite. And the feasibility, you need to think about it, okay, whether we have human resources to do this, whether we have the capital funding to support this. So yeah, so this is the thing, like this is the key word why I say it in the real exam, the immediate reaction I would respond to the answers. So by doing this, I could adapt my preparations to the real questions in the exam days. And the next tips I would share in the real exam day is the time management. I think a lot of people would talk about the time management, but for me, I think the time management is not about how quick and how fast you can write your answer down while you open the exam day materials. It's about how you allocate your time wisely. So you all have 3.5 hours to complete the exam, I guess, with the time not changed. So because I'm not a fast reader, so I split these 3.5 hours into 2 sections, preparation section and the real writing section. So I used the first 30 minutes for my preparation. So the first 20 minutes, I would read the questions, highlight the keywords, and read the exam day materials. Then the last 10 minutes of this 30 preparation minutes, I would start to structure my answers. And then I split the entire 100 marks questions into 1.8 minutes per mark within the 3 hours. So for example, if it's a 20 marks questions, then it takes me 36 minutes to write the answer. Once it's past the 36 minutes, I will move away. Don't hesitate, just move away to the next questions. So by doing this, I can at least analyze the whole questions comprehensively, so I won't be too wrong from the questions. So I won't end up by spending entire minutes to write the questions, gain nothing. And also by doing this, I can at least make sure I answered every question, which would increase the chance I gain some marks from each question I achieved. So finally, what I want to say is the strategic case study is not something like monsters which is unbeatable. You already have passed the first 11 difficult exams, so surely you will definitely pass this one. I mean, you just need to change the way how you prepared the first exam, first 11 exams you prepared. You have to remember the case study is to test your strategic thinking, your critical thinking, rather than test your knowledge of details on how to do your day-to-day work. So, I mean, there is no right or wrong answer for the case study, really. It's all about, whether you answered the questions. It's not about, how literate you are about writing So what I want to say is be confident about yourself, free yourself out from the millions syllabus embedded in the case study. Bird view the whole case. You control this case and understand the key things running through the case. Then you will pass this exam. So these are my highlighted tips. So good luck to everyone.
Thank you, Lynn. That's really helpful to hear your perspective and your experience, and thank you for sharing that. Yes, thank you to both of our speakers. They're going to be sticking around for a Q&A at the end. We are running a little bit behind schedule, so if you want to start thinking about your questions, you could put them in the Q&A box, and I think Lynn and Jack, you should be able to type your answers if you want to start doing that. That's okay, but I'm just going to quickly whiz over a myth-busting section. So this was raised as something in the last CSN meeting. And it was raised because there are sometimes rumors or assumptions that are flying around about the case study that perhaps students are uncertain about. So we asked you to submit those. And I also spoke to Jack about what his thoughts were and some other members of the CSN as well. So I'm just going to whiz through what they've said and collected them together. So the first point is that there are no wrong answers. So unfortunately, there are some wrong answers when it comes to the case study, but it's really about how you making sure that you frame your answers in the context of the case study and making sure that they are realistic and achievable. So Jack here has put a really good example, which was if your case study was in the context of cutting costs or austerity, which often the case studies are now because that's the world that we live in. So if your recommendations were around hiring extra staff or hiring external consultants, then that wouldn't be really fitting within the context of the case, and that's what might lose you marks. So it's just important to, as we've already heard already, make sure that you're framing your answers in the context of the case. Another one, which I think Jax has already touched upon, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the fact that calculations are not important. So they definitely are and can really help you when you're formulating recommendations, but they can be very time consuming. So it's important that, as we've heard, you're very strict with your time. So if you're spending too much time on a calculation, getting bogged down in it, make sure you're strict and you move on. So it's quite possible that you could come up with some kind of semi-reasonable answer or figure so that you could use that in your recommendations. Like, don't be afraid to do that. Just make sure that you're then taking it forward and analyzing it. And as we've already said, making sure that that's framed then within the context of the case study, whichever it may be. And as well, making sure that you're prepared before, and looking at your key financial models will really help you when you're coming into the exam. If you haven't expected some calculation to come up, that will just give you a bit more confidence when you're tackling those. You need to prepare for every possible scenario. So I think this is really not feasible within the time that's given. So within the 4 weeks between you receiving the advanced material and sitting the exam. So as Jack and Lynn have already said, really making sure that you've got those models nailed down so you know your acronyms and you've tried to apply as a few to the scenario. Then you'll be prepared for anything that comes up in the exam, because it's quite likely that there's something that will be in the exam that perhaps you haven't prepared for. But if you've spent the time reading the case, analysing it, familiarising yourself with the models, you will be prepared to answer it. And you just need to remain calm. And perhaps, as Jack said, take an easy question first, come back to it once you've formulated your thoughts a little bit more. And then finally, the use of external material. So similar to the last one, the studying for the exam is very time sensitive. You've really got a deadline, you've only got 4 weeks, and we've all got day jobs. So realistically, the best method for studying would be to focus on the case rather than looking externally. But if you have got some extra time or you want to do some extra reading, it may help you in order to formulate other strategies that the organisation could be pursuing, or just to give you a perspective on different options. And it has been heard of that students have found the exact organisation that the case is based on, but it just depends on your case. And I think really the message is the advanced material is the place to go and will help you for the exam. But also don't forget that tutors are there. So you can sense check any information that you've seen on the WhatsApp group or that you found yourself if you're not certain if it's going to help you for that exam. So you could contact them on the discussion forum, or you could use their CIPFA email address just to sense check anything if you're not certain. So just be aware that that's there for you. So that was a very whistle-stop tour of myth busting. And if you do have any other myths or advice that you want checked, you can feel free to drop the CSN an email or even talk to the tutors. They might be the best people to answer those questions. So that brings us to a Q&A. So we've got about 8 minutes for a Q&A. It'll be very, very whistle-stop tour. I wanted to talk about some pre-submitted questions before I invite our presenters to speak. So I think we've covered a lot of it already. So if there's something that you particularly want to ask, then please probably resubmit the question, because I think we have spoken about how you prepare for the exam day material. Can you talk us through what you did from the point of receiving the advanced material? I feel like we've covered those. This question about whether there'll be 2 screens, from my experience, no, you're not allowed to use 2 screens. It's only 1 screen. This might be a question to ask for CIPFA, but what you can do is you can connect your laptop to a monitor. You just need to change the settings for your laptop to make sure that when you close the lid, it doesn't go to sleep. And then you can use the bigger screen, which is quite helpful with Rogo, because then you can just get a few more bits of information on the screen and it just increases your flexibility. So obviously you'll need an external mouse, an external camera as well, and a keyboard to be able to do that. But that's what I would recommend. But you can always speak to CIPFA or check the exam regulations for that. And we've spoken a lot about collaboration as well as time management. So I think really it's questions that are in the Q&A, or if anyone would like to raise their hand and ask a question, please feel free. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can check the Q&A. So see that Jack's answering some questions, which is great. I would also like to introduce Sean Kremer, who's here. He is a Deputy 151 officer who sat the case study exam 10 years ago. He did well in the exam, so he's here to provide his perspective as well. So if you've got a question for a specific speaker, feel free to direct it at them. I don't think we've got any hands up at the moment, so I have a couple of questions to get us going. So I don't mind who wants to speak to this, but so one of my tutors suggested that we read the exam day material, the advanced material every day before the exam. I wondered whether any of you did that, or how often you read it.
Yeah, I can speak on that, Harriet. So to be honest, I probably only read the full case from front to back 1 or 2 times, but because you're analysing different elements of it every day, you're reading and rereading individual sections. So I mean, it really just what works for you. I prefer learning kind of in chunks, and then that kind of fits into the big pictures, because reading 15 pages, my mind was wandering, thinking the answers and proposals and stuff like that. It was very hard for me to concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Jack said and what's your tutor's recommendation.
Yeah.
I would put further, not just read, but memorize. Because I failed my exams before. So the time I failed is because I'm not familiar with the case study.
Okay.
And I think, anyway, I got advanced materials and the exam day materials. I can read through while I'm answer the questions. No, the thing is you don't have time.
Yeah.
To read through and find the sentence, find the elements from the materials. So the better you memorize the case study, the more you will pass the exam. Mm-hmm.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing as you said, Jack. If I was reading it every day, I'd just probably start to zone out. So that's really helpful to hear that you actually applied it to the models and that's how you pick it up. Thank you both. Thank you. And I was wondering, how much did you make use of the tutors during your, because I know we spoke about collaboration within like work and also on the WhatsApp group, but I wondered how much you were involved with the tutors.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to, I mean, with the case study, you obviously get access to multiple tutors over your different classes and stuff. So the tutors were very, very helpful to me personally, both in kind of providing advice on whether I was looking at things from the correct perspective, but also give me tangible feedback on the work that I'd done. So in advance of the final revision session, most of them should recommend that you send in some prepared analysis, and they'll go over that, they provide feedback to you, but they should be able to do that offline for you as well. But yeah, I would utilize them as much as possible because they're incredibly helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, me too, the same. So I involved with tutors pretty much very intense. And I send my potential questions and the things I identified from the case and send to tutor and ask their opinion to make sure I'm not, over prepared. I'm not, looking to the wrong direction or overlooked like that. So that would give me a bit of confidence and also to make sure, I answer the right questions.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I'm not seeing anyone with their hand up or any other questions in the Q&A. So I wondered, Sean, whether you wanted to speak. We've got 2 minutes left. Feel free to share any pearls of wisdom if you'd like.
I can do. Thanks, Harriet. Yeah, it's a really, really helpful session, I think, from Jack and Lynn talking through some of their feedback. Most of the points I think I shared with you in advance, Harriet, have been covered. So there's probably no super pearls of wisdom that haven't been added. That only think probably the one I'd say about the first question that was answered earlier was around sharing that case, the advanced materials with colleagues, like get the views of your Section 151 officer, ask your chief executive. Don't be afraid to use that, because they will all come at it from a different angle, and probably remembering their analysis of it is probably more important than some of your analysis, as they'll add some flavor to it. And then also really trying to think through what are the emerging themes in that material. So because you know roughly how many questions you're going to get, so there's likely to be a couple of themes or scenarios that play out. So trying to think through the advanced material and the exam day material, which themes and which questions are possibly going to come up as a result of this information. And that's probably more useful than, like has been said, knowing the thing cover to cover, word for word, thinking what are the big themes or emerging categories. Is probably the most significant use of your time in the run up to the exams.
That's really helpful, thank you, and perfectly timed. I've just seen a question come through about running a similar session for SPF. I have been thinking about doing that. It's in the works. I don't know if we'll get it for this December sitting. I will do my best. So yeah, watch this space and I'll be in touch if we can. That's 1 o'clock. So thank you very much for everyone for attending, to Jack and Lynn and Sean for sharing their experience and their tips. Really, really helpful. And we will be circulating the recording and the slides after this session. So don't worry if you didn't capture everything. You can always refer back to it. Thank you very much. And yeah, good luck for those of you who are sitting in December or in the future. Thank you.
Good luck, everyone. Thanks.